All right, everybody, we are back for another House of Bricks live event, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed with today's guest. As you know, the House of Bricks is all about using life's experiences for you. It is the challenges and the resistance that creates the growth. But a lot of people fall short in that time of resistance. It's actually the best time for you to make progress, but having the right mindset and the right people around you is what's really going to enable you to do that. You also know we're launching our Startup X program tomorrow for founders and startup businesses. And if anyone needs a strong mindset, it is an entrepreneur, because 9 out of 10 startups fail. It's probably higher than that because entrepreneurs don't like to admit when they fail. They just keep pushing and pushing forward. And today have a very special guest coming in from Ontario, Canada. Dr. JP, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Adam. Great to be here.
Appreciate you jumping on. And so, as you know, I'm an athlete, and I find the link between being an entrepreneur and sports. And I know you work at the highest level with high-performing teams, top CEOs, and really talking about your last 8% system. And I'd love to have you share a little bit about that with our audience.
Absolutely. Adam, what was your sport?
So I played basketball, and no, that was not me dunking there. So I could dunk, just not in a game. So it's a big difference.
On that Nerf hoop. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Hey, listen, there is a link, which is that when we're under pressure, there's a lot at stake. Right? When you're an entrepreneur and you're under a pressure, financial, emotional, as you said, entrepreneurs, I happen to be one, we don't like to admit mistakes. It's absolutely right on. But when we're under pressure, there's a lot going on. And there's this dichotomy of, because of the way the brain works, we don't do better under pressure. It's a myth, right? It's a complete myth. We think that Michael Jordan was better under pressure. He wasn't. He shot worse when he was shooting the free throw in a controlled situation, in a game, at the end of the game, in the playoffs, up a point, down a point, or tied. In that scenario, when you compare how he shot in that high-pressure situation compared to his season or even his playoff average, he shot worse, consistent with every basketball player in the history of the game. So and there's a whole bunch of other examples I can give you from sport, from business, but the bottom line is we're diminished under pressure. We are. Okay, that's point one. And here's the conundrum. At the same time that we're diminished under pressure, what we do under pressure has a bigger impact on the team around us. There's something called the cortisol effect. Cortisol is a stress hormone. When we're under pressure, there's more cortisol in our brain. One of the things that cortisol does is that it sears in memory in a more profound way. Adam, what was the most just heartbreaking loss you ever experienced in basketball?
In basketball, let's see. It'd probably have to be, well, I know exactly what it was. So when I was 32 years old, you're going to love this, and you don't know it.
Last year, right? Last year?
Well, what's fun? Yeah, last year, just turned 33 for the 15th time. Just doing math under pressure right there. I didn't even do it right. It's 12th time. So when I was 32, I just sold a tech company. So I played basketball in high school and my freshman year of college, and sold my tech company. I was around the house, and about 2 weeks in, my wife looks over at me and she's like, "You need to get a job. I don't care if you're a barista at Starbucks. You need to get a job." Because I'm a visionary. I don't do anything. I just delegate. And so I woke up and started delegating tasks to her, and then she looked at me in the kitchen. I jumped out of the way of the frying pan. She's like, "You need to get a job." And so I played basketball at 32 years old, made a semi-pro basketball team, hadn't played for 12 years, and joined the Rochester, New York Razor Sharks. And they had won, I think, 4 out of the last 6 championships in the PBL. So we were locked and loaded to win it, and we ended up losing in the second round. So it was my one shot at winning a professional championship. And I don't care if it's minor leagues. People say I played semi-pro, but if someone's paying to watch you play, you're a professional. Even though it's a $5 ticket, they're paying to come watch you play. So that would have been kind of the mark outside of, my wife and 4 kids to like win a championship at a professional level.
Right. And so the point that I want everyone to listen to is, 12 years ago, whatever it is, and Adam can remember it like that. Because when we're under pressure, we have more cortisol in our brain. Cortisol is a stress hormone that sears in memory in a more profound way. So it's almost like this. We can do a lot of stuff when there's not pressure. And the people we're interacting with, our teammates, in a business, our teams, they don't really take note. But when we're all under pressure, there's more cortisol in all of our brains. What you do in that moment is what gets seared into their brain. And if you're the leader, that's when you're creating culture on your team. So it's this conundrum. We're diminished under pressure, even though we don't think we are. We are. We don't think as clearly. We don't act as decisively or as, kind of strategically. At the same time that we're diminished, we're having the biggest impact we ever have. So that says something, I hope, for everyone here. It says you got to get better at managing your brain under pressure. And so what we've done is we survey 40,000 people a month. We're big into research. We found that we have about 8% of situations that are higher pressure. So we've tried to quantify the pressure situations. So in the course of a day, you will be in a conversation with somebody on your team, Adam, and let's say it's not going so well, and you need to give them feedback. You probably, like most people, will get to about 85, 90, 92% of what you want to say. But when you get to that hardest part of the conversation and you start to see them reacting and you don't want to hurt their feelings, but you got to do what you got to do, you're in that moment. What we found is that for most people, it's around 8%. That last 8%, that's where we struggle to give that hardest feedback on conversations, to make that hard decision around decisions. And so we've quantified that it's at 8% that is where we're going to have our biggest impact, but we also have our biggest opportunity. And so that's really what the last 8% is. It's quantifying where we need to take risks. And then what we do is we help leaders manage their brain to be better in those moments. And it's really 2 parts. One is to create that last 8% leader, but also to create that last 8% culture on your team that can be high performing, and the two go together.
Yeah, and that's really good. And I'm into the data too, and did my homework prior to getting this time with you today. And I heard you talk about it's kind of really the biggest illusion is communication, right? Like there really isn't communication at all. And so, putting yourself as an entrepreneur or CEO that's out there, and high performers, by the way, are often very bad leaders because the expectations they put on themselves, how do you measure that out to the people you're leading? But if your culture isn't the way you want it today, typical high performer is, I just listened to this podcast. You call a meeting. We're changing our culture. This is the way we're going to do things. Like, how do you make incremental change to start to change your culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And by the way, you're absolutely correct. Kind of individual athletes, even if they play on a team, don't generally make great coaches, great leaders. Michael Jordan's a great example, right? He's not a great leader. Never was when he played and after he played. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, including pressure they put on themselves, but also because they lack a lot of self-awareness. We know in the data that 90% of us think we're self-aware. Only about 10 or 15% of us are. And it's not surprising. And part of it is when we're under pressure, we get very self-referential. And that becomes a habit for athletes. So it's actually something you got to look out for. You're a father of, athletes. I know you do this because of the work you do, but it's really important that all of us in these parental roles really try to build our kids' self-awareness, actually more than anything, because one day they're not going to be in the show. They are going to be, like you and I, working in relationship, and you want them to have self-awareness so they don't, act and have impact that they're not aware of. But anyway, coming back to your next question, which is how do we grow this? Well, it's funny. There's some organizations we work with who say, well, I don't know if they say it, but it's just this belief that the senior leaders go away. They decide what are the values that we're going to have for our organization. They put them on the wall, put them on the, the deck, the PowerPoint deck. And that's our culture. And it's not. It's clearly not, right? Here's what we know. Culture gets created in last 8% moments when cortisol is high. We've done a study, 64 or 68, I can't remember in this moment. I think 64% of folks don't even know the values in their organization. So under pressure, you're going to expect them to be able to live those values? No. What happens is culture gets created in the hard moments. Like how you show up when you're under pressure, Adam, when you're feeling, you got to hit a deadline, you got to meet a client's need, you're going bankrupt, whatever. What you do in that moment, because that cortisol effect, that gets seared into the brain of your team. And it's not what you say, oh, these are our values. It's what you do in the hard moments. That's what becomes the culture, because culture really are, the way to define culture is that's the stories about how we do things around here. And that gets created in those last 8% moments. So the good news is not only do you want to build these skills to be better, to manage your brain in the last 8% for you to be that last 8% leader, but actually if you're better in those moments, that becomes the culture on your team. And that's exciting because now you've been on, let me ask you, I'd like you to tell me the best culture you've ever been at on a team. It could be your organization or a sport team. Right now, tell me the best organization you've been at in terms of culture.
Simple answer. So when I was 16 years old, I had the honor of being an intern for Dan Gilbert, owner of Rocket Mortgage, owns the Cleveland Cavaliers. But it was at the time maybe 90, 100 team members. So I got a crash course MBA and being an entrepreneur. But Rocket Mortgage, like everyone that works there, I mean, he just has them built in. Everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid, which sounds bad in a sense, but it's just like everyone is just bought in and they all speak the same language. They have what they call the isms, different phrases that everyone says, and just creates alignment. People are running on the same frequency. So that would hands down be the best culture.
And Dan is kind of famous for every new person who comes in the organization, he's there during orientation. Like he's there front and center. And I don't know if that's still the case now, because it's obviously big and, whatever it is now. But the bottom line is this. You could just define so quickly what it was about that culture. And it's because of how people showed up. It's not what they said on the wall. It's what they did. And so, that's the good news is we can create culture all the time. So in fact, one of the things that you said I loved in terms of this idea of a brick and resistance, it's in our hardest moments, our last 8% moments that most of us think that doesn't feel good. I'm going to move away from it. In fact, we actually would do one of two things. We either avoid or we make a mess of it. Right. Yeah. And what we want people to walk away with is actually in that last 8% moment, it's your biggest opportunity to transform yourself, which is what you're saying, and the culture on your team. And so you want to look at it differently. In fact, you actually want to look for last 8% situations, because that's when you can actually co-create the culture on your team versus going away on some retreat and saying, these are our 5 values. And so that's why I want everyone to walk away saying, when it's hard, that's actually your biggest opportunity to transform yourself, but also to build the culture on your team.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of work with high performers at the highest levels. Are there any common patterns or characteristics that you see in them? Because there are definitely people more talented and more athletic than Michael Jordan. It's hard to believe, but playing street ball, I've seen guys that can jump higher, more athletic, but there's just something different, that separates. There's probably thousands of guys that could be in the NBA that aren't. And part of that is their ability to perform in that last 8%. But what are the common threads that you've seen?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was working with the Orlando Magic, Tracy McGrady kind of came in, and you talk to folks in basketball, and they'll tell you he was a better athlete, he had better talent in some ways than Michael Jordan. He had some freaky skills that came together. And I don't want to really call out Tracy. That's not really fair. But, if you don't have a drive, I mean, everyone does, but
Mm-hmm.
you got to be like in a normal distribution of a population, right? That top 10%, they have a huge drive, but we're talking about the top 10% of that 10%. They've even got more. So, I mean, drive is just so key. And so I think it's like two things probably, that ability to have to be driven, which Michael clearly was, and so are so many other athletes. But if you twin drive with self-awareness, then it's really powerful. Because I've been to 6 Olympic Games, and there's some young athletes who go to an Olympics and they're in over their skis and they're overwhelmed and they don't do so well. And when they go back to their second Olympics, there's some athletes who recognize what happened and they have self-awareness to say, hey, I got to get a bit better at that. And so they work at it. And so that's that self-awareness, that aggressive learning. And there's some athletes who don't. And I'm not saying Tracy didn't, because I don't know him, quite frankly, really. But I think it's both the drive, but twinned with the self-awareness, at least for the kind of more individual athlete. I would say those are two key qualities. For the leader, I can tell you it's almost the same, but it's self-awareness and not drive. Drive matters, but it's flexibility. Can you be flexible compared to, what's going on in your world? What's Adam? What drives him? If for me as a leader, if I can understand what drives you, that's going to make a big difference. So it's like that self-awareness with flexibility to then change based on the external environment and the internal environment. That's what we know from the research.
Well, if you figure out how to understand me, I'm sure my wife will become a client immediately. So, and everyone around me. So good luck with that. But it's funny you brought up Tracy McGrady. I'll go ahead and say something. I unfollowed him because he said Steph Curry wasn't one of the top 10 basketball players of all time. So I said, he did great, good player, but lost some credibility with me there. But I always get sucked into the basketball conversations. Entrepreneur, last 27 years, we're now coaching and leading and advising other entrepreneurs. We got connected through David Meltzer. You may or may not know, but now I'm sponsoring one of his episodes on the 2-minute drill, which is for entrepreneurs to come in and, hey, there's tons of great products out there, tons of great business, but if you can't perform in that 2 minutes of pressure, it's a missed opportunity, because you never know. We're all one conversation away from changing the rest of our life and our business. So any advice for entrepreneurs that are out there and how they can prepare for this 2 minutes?
That's a great question. It's a bit of an odd, there's two things. One is we think under pressure, we have to perform better than we've ever performed before to succeed. That's the story we tell ourselves. Under pressure, I need to be better than I've ever been before, especially as we go to higher levels. In that 2 minutes, I got to be better than I've ever been before to be successful. But here's the thing. You will be compromised. Like, that's wrong. That's a myth. You will make a mistake. So I want to tell everyone who goes into that 2 minutes, you will make a mistake. You will. So then here's the key. If you tell yourself a different story, it makes all the difference. I don't need to be perfect to be successful. In fact, when I'm not perfect, which I expect not to be, where I'm going to win is in letting go of that quicker than everyone else. Because what happens is that if you go into that 2 minutes and think, I got to be perfect, and you're imperfect, you get a downward loop. You're like, oh shit, I made excuse my language, a mistake. And you get a bit of shame, embarrassment, and it starts to go, and you start to panic. No, you're going to make a mistake. Let it go. Right? That's the key right there. Right? It is truly having that amnesia. And be okay that there's so much more that's coming out of that 2 minutes than one small mistake. That's the key. Change the story. Change the story. You don't need to be perfect. You won't be perfect. What you want is to be better at letting go quicker than the next person.
Yeah, and your mistakes are always bigger to you. When you're giving a presentation, everything stands out. And one of the things we talked about on the office hours with David is we always fail, to the level of our preparation. We don't rise to the occasion.
That's it.
Putting in the work in advance, and there's different things you can do. Adjust your shirt when you make a mistake, or like some sort of action, right? That resets you. And so as we were talking about just that time and the preparation, you were talking about, it's the story that we tell ourselves. And I read recently, like the only reason our past exists is so we make better decisions in the future. And so people hold on to things in the past, and it's a story we tell ourselves. Do you have any advice on how people can reframe previous actions for future results?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, in a short moment, hard, but the path is clear. Get a coach. I mean, that's the good work you're doing, Adam. That's a good work that, if you're an entrepreneur, get a coach. Oh my gosh. Michael Jordan needed a coach. Wayne Gretzky needed a coach. LeBron James needed a coach. We all need a coach. And so to me, and I've always had either a coach, as I say it, in the last 17 years, either a coach or a therapist. When my life's going well, it's a coach. It's not going so well, I get to have a therapist. But the bottom line, though, is that I have that person who I can call up and literally go, Solomon, hey, you know what? I'm struggling with this. Made a mistake. This didn't go well. Struggling with a conversation I need to have. And you kind of play it out. And you actually get all your anxiety. You learn, but you get all your anxiety out. So now I'm going to turn and have this meeting with you, Adam, and I got to give you feedback. I come in as a bit more of a non-anxious presence. I'm not coming in like, because I know what I'm going to say is going to upset you. So I'm like anxious. So we've got to do some self-regulation first. So that's it. So the path is have a coach and learn tools of self-regulation, which are out there, right? I mean, that's what we teach, but it's out there. It doesn't have to come from us. This is the golden age of education. There's, as you know, podcasts and books and just videos. It's just an incredible time, the golden age to learn. And that's that self-awareness, right? To learn, to be an aggressive learner. I'll tell you my favorite set of all of our research. High performers make mistakes, but they extract 3 to 5 times more information from the same opportunity to learn as an average performer, right? So it's like no ego. It's like, is this going to help me get better? Great, take it on. So that to me is the key.
Well, that's great. And typical guy answer is therapy when there's a problem, right? So my wife's like preventative. Well, everything's good. What's up? I was like, there's nothing wrong, And then I find out things are going wrong when I ask. So, but yeah, that's great feedback there. And then what I was going to ask you, so we really talk about 3 types of relationships in the House of Bricks. One is being mentored from someone else. The second is peer-to-peer relationships, right?
Yep.
Having someone to climb the mountain with together. But where I feel like a lot of people miss out is mentoring other people, right? Yeah. And no matter where you are in life, you have something that you can share and empower someone else with. Is there any science to support the value of mentoring others for your own development?
Yeah, it is. There's a lot. In fact, in our programs, part of what we do is we set up these peer coaching relationships where you're coaching another individual and just what you're saying, to sit there and to be not being coached, which is hugely valuable, but you're actually in a position to kind of serve someone else, to ask good questions, not give advice, but ask good questions. It's transformative. It's actually one of the best leadership development activities you can do, because what we know is that when there's a piece of content, let's say self-regulation or empathy, whatever it is, being an entrepreneur, like kind of whatever, if you hear it, great. You get so much from that. If you read it, you get so much. If you read and hear, you get a bit more. If you repeat it, like there's all these things, right? But if you have to reteach something, you actually take more control and take more responsibility of the content, and the ability to retain that information and internalize that information is much greater. So in fact, there's a bunch of things going on when we coach others. I'm 100% behind that as a really valuable piece for leadership development for everyone listening.
And so for the, entrepreneurs, leaders, and really anyone in life, like what are some practical steps? Obviously, buy your book, follow your content. I know you're not here to pitch the book, but we'll talk about it at the end. But we're all about just kind of distilling things into simple steps. Like where does someone start? Because all this sounds great. Reframe my mindset. Okay. Use every experience as a growing opportunity. But are there any, 1, 2, 3 steps to get started?
Yeah, probably make it a habit. So during COVID, we took a morning routine that we've been using with athletes for 25 years, like that we kind of sold as a product, and we made it freely available because we just thought, let's serve. And it's in the form of a podcast, and it's a walking podcast, right? So it's a way to build habits. What we do, we wake up in the morning, we look at this. I grab my glasses on an off day, and I'm just like, and it spikes our cortisol. It's not a good thing. For the first 20 minutes, don't do that. Go, and it doesn't have to be mine, but I mean, the content of mine is all about what you're asking about. But you go for a 20-minute walk, and there's three parts to this, and we've done a whole bunch of, research around this. If you walk, first thing, exercise, mood follows movement. Mood follows movement. So you go for a 15 or 20-minute walk, right? In this podcast. You do mindfulness, not sitting mindfulness. Most people have trouble with sitting mindfulness. You give up after 5 minutes, right?
Absolutely.
Instead, yeah. So what we found is the easier way in is go for a walk, and it's my voice, and I'm guiding you through walking mindfulness. Okay, cool. So now you're building these habits. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why you do that. You're better than the last 8% when you can. But we finished with goals and gratitude. The point is you've got to find habits that help you start your day and kind of through the course of your day where you're really managing your brain. That's kind of it. I mean, there's a lot more, but that's probably the best place that I would say people, can get. Like there's like 170 episodes, so 170 ideas of the day, kind of some of the stuff we've talked about here. So there's lots of good stuff there.
Well, I'm going to subscribe to that because I've tried meditation and there's a bird. Oh, there's a dog. Exactly. I'm like, these people meditating for 30, 45 minutes, and it's just not scalable. I see successful people now too, like their morning routine is an hour and a half, they're 30 minutes in the sauna, they're in the ice bath, they're meditating, they're journaling. I'm like,
who has time?
Who has time for that? Like, I guarantee you, Jeff Bezos, when he started, was not, meditating all day. They're working. Like, go to work, So
I totally agree.
Having
that's
something.
What we found. That's what we kept it really short for that reason, right? Just go for a 15 or 20-minute walk, and then and it helps you start your day really more on purpose, which is again something I know you would probably talk about, but that's really important for folks, especially as an entrepreneur, because it's so easy to get pushed when things aren't going great, when you have a bad week, a bad quarter, results aren't there. So you got to manage yourself because you're setting the tone. Everyone, you're setting the tone for your team and how you show up.
And I'm glad you just mentioned that. So with the team culture, as your business grows, you want to recruit people that fit within your culture. And with this mindset, what are some of the characteristics you would look in building a team in, as you start to hire more people? What are some characteristics that you look for to build a strong team?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great one. I'd probably go back to this kind of self-awareness and this flexibility. I would ask them real questions around times when they've learned, through hard moments. Like the technical stuff, you're going to figure that out. They have it, they don't have it, but it's more fit. It's more fit than anything. And I'd say maybe this final one is, do they have a history of being courageous in the last 8%, of having that hard part of the conversation? Because for a lot of people who are not aggressive learners, it's hard for them to learn that stuff. If you're an aggressive learner, you can do it. But if they're both not an aggressive learner and they avoid kind of hard situations, then you're in trouble. So I would probably say courage would be right up there as well in your hires.
Well, I appreciate that. And just to, again, thank you for getting on our show today. And I do want everyone to hear from you, how they can learn more about you, your podcast, your book. So give us the 1 minute.
Yeah. So the book is Performing Under Pressure. It's kind of available anywhere and everywhere. But the podcast is called The Last 8% Morning. And so it's just 15 or 20 minutes. It's very small, very short. It's just me guiding you. And in fact, some people listen to it during the day when they're having a bad part of the day. In fact, a bit embarrassed to say this, but when I'm having a bad day, sometimes I go for a walk and listen to myself. But I do it. It just calms me. Anyway, that's probably, and then just the, ihhp.com. That's our website, Institute for Health and Human Potential, ihhp.com. You can learn all about the last 8% culture system there.
Well, I appreciate you joining today, and I'll give my 4 sons your phone number to text you, because every time I get someone like you on, like I'm walking out of my office. All right, guys, you're downloading this podcast, you're buying this book. I want to see your notes. It better be done in a week. So, but in all seriousness, thanks a lot for joining House of Bricks live today and giving our entrepreneurs and founders some excellent advice of how they can make it to the 2-minute drill and perform at the highest level. Even though they will make mistakes, it's how they respond to them that's going to separate them. So thanks again for joining the House of Bricks live, and I'll talk to you soon.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you, Adam.